Our next panel, we're going to get some chairs and tables out here, is our VC panel. And I had a venture capital joke, but I'm sorry, it's just not a good fit at this time. And in the meantime, let me know if I can be helpful. Sorry about that. So, as we know, getting capital is vital for all the entrepreneurs out there, and this macro environment sucks for everyone. And so this should be a great conversation where we have 3 prominent local investors talking about what's getting done, what's not getting done, and what companies can do to raise money today. David, who's an investor from Sebastopol, is going to be our guide. So, come on up, guys. I guess
you'll be. I guess I'll be at the podium, or yeah, it's fine.
No, there's another chair.
there'll be another chair, and there should be.
David, you're right here.
I'm right here. Okay.
There's another chair coming for you.
Yeah.
Should I use this mic? Can you hear me on this one? Handheld? Okay, great.
Yeah, I think you take this one.
Well, it's a little bit of deja vu for me. I moved to Sonoma County in 2000. It was the middle of the telecom boom, and I was, thought, wow, the startup community is taking off here in Sonoma County. And took a job here at Sonoma State. I was the director of the wine business program. I see Ray Johnson, who took over for me here. And but the real reason I took the job was they were going to create a entrepreneurship center. And that was what I was hoping would be the focal point for the community here. But thanks to Zach and MSIV, we have that focal point, which has been desperately needed for the North Bay startup community. So thanks again. I'm joined here with Katherine and Jed, and we're going to talk about startup funding. And so the first thing I'd like to do is just have you each introduce yourself, your fund, and if you have a sector focus and a stage focus.
Great. I'll jump in. Can you hear me? Is this on? Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Thank you, Zach and Elizabeth, for having us. Great group of people. I actually saw someone I went to college with about 30 plus years ago here, so I mean, pretty amazing. I'm Katherine Rice. I'm a partner at Gingerbread Capital. We are a venture fund out of a family office, and we invest in the next generation of female founders. So we've got about 80 portfolio companies, all female founders and co-founders, and we're LPs in about 33 funds that are run by women, and a few are run by Black men. Right on. We focus on Series A, so earlier stage. We will do seed, kind of later stage seed, and beyond. Given the family office, we have a little bit of flexibility, but all around lifting up emerging managers and founders and leaders.
Great. My name is Jed Katz. I'm one of the partners at Javelin Venture Partners. We've been around about almost 15 years now, and we do what we call late seed and early Series A, which is, think of it as $2 to $4 million checks in that first institutional round. That's what I do professionally. On the side, occasionally, I also do some angel investing in companies that don't necessarily fit the criteria of Javelin, but are a lot of fun to work on. And I've been lucky enough to work with Katherine on a number of those, actually both with Javelin and on the side. And David I've known for a couple decades. By the way, can I just say, Sarah, that was a fantastic speech. I loved everything you said.
Absolutely. So when entrepreneurs are thinking about raising capital and bootstrapping or taking other people's money, how should they approach that? And then when is venture capital the right type of capital for a business?
Yes, sir.
So let me take the second part first. The venture capital is usually best suited for companies that can be very, very big. So we define that as a clean path to 100 million plus in revenue, a multi-billion-dollar market opportunity, a reason why companies would pay a high multiple for the company down the road if they succeeded, some strategic benefit they can create that is really hard to duplicate, those types of things. So it comes down to scale, basically, right? And if the scale of what you're building is not going to be that large, then you will probably be wasting a lot of time going to most venture funds to fund it, unless you think you can innovate your way along the way to a much bigger opportunity.
And Catherine, how should entrepreneurs think about, bootstrapping their business or maybe raising friends and family capital?
Yeah, and I love what was said earlier by Sarah. I've started businesses and I've been an operator for a lot of my career before being an investor. Some successful and some not successful. So I appreciate that. I think, especially right now, thinking about pulling together your business and bootstrapping it as long as you can, I think is a great idea. Also surrounding yourself with great people, leverage that network that Sarah spoke of too. Just really bringing together people and continuing to ask to get introduced to other people, and through that get free advice, get advice for equity, get some small checks, start to meet some angels like Jed, who could potentially invest in your business. And I think doing that as long as you can to get a business model and then show your path to profitability, which you'll hear us talk about, is kind of a big focus right now in venture. I come from private equity, so I really appreciate that. But really kind of trying to have a vision that makes sense with a business model and think about the metrics and the real proof points before you go out and try to raise kind of real big money. But I agree with Jed. I think you have one shot or two shots at these relationships you develop in the VC community. And while you want to build relationships, you also want to leverage everybody's time. So don't go to them too soon and try to really build out your model before.
The good news is a lot of the venture capitalists you might go to that you don't fit the criteria for whatever reason, get into good conversations with them because they might have great ideas for you. And oftentimes when we say no to companies, we send them down a path of other seed investors or angel investors or just people that like to invest in that category. And it often leads to success. It might be a smaller round or look a little different, but they do get funding.
That's a great point. I feel like as an operator, you're so focused myopically on your business. But in the venture world, we all talk to each other. I'm constantly asking Jed about great female founders. He's asking us about businesses we've seen that are kind of ready for a bigger check. And so always do the ask when you're talking to a VC firm or an individual investor, and just say, who else should I be talking to? Here's my list. Can you help me to get to them? I think that's always really helpful.
Yeah, and if you're not a candidate for venture capital, they may be able to introduce you to an angel. Ironically, when I was an undergrad at Berkeley and at a startup, someone introduced me to an angel investor, Marin, and he invested in my company back then, and I think he's gone on to invest with me in like 20 other ventures. So, we've had a relationship for over 20 years, and 20 companies. So it's sort of amazing what's here locally, both, in Marin and up here in Sonoma. When entrepreneurs approach an investor, do you have any tips and thoughts about how they can approach them? And then also, what should they be looking for in an investor?
Yeah, I'll start. I think it's always great. I appreciate the point about reaching out on LinkedIn, and we do get a lot of cold emails or cold LinkedIns to respond to. But if you know somebody that you can use LinkedIn for this, if you know somebody who knows the investor that you really think would be good for your business, ask for an intro, because we often, almost always, if Jed sends somebody to me, I will take that meeting or call. But for most people in our network, someone sends it to us, even if it's too early, we'll take the call. So try to get a warm intro. And then, as I said before, always ask for, here are the 5 people I want to meet. Could you help me? I see you know them. Could you help me to get to know them?
I think if you're going to approach a firm, and I agree with everything Katherine just said. If you're going to approach a firm, try and limit it or narrow it down to the partner at that firm that is most likely to be your champion. So most likely to have for whatever reason likes the sector or likes the business model or you just get along with really well personally. And these are some of the most networked people in the world. So it's usually pretty easy to get a warm intro from somebody. Just to kind of increase your odds that you'll be responded to in some timely manner, you'll get a meeting quickly, and even they'll walk into the meeting with kind of a better mindset from the second it starts. If that's impossible, then when you do reach out cold, make it personal. Don't make it look like you're reaching out to 100 investors at once. Try to make each one as personal as possible. Why you're reaching out to them, why it makes sense to talk. Don't write a book. Keep it relatively brief, and just the whole ask is getting on a Zoom or something with them. That's it. That's all you're trying to accomplish with that. And
I would say when you're in the meeting, just to add to what Jed said, and I agree with all of that, it's also keeping it really quick and focused. So send a deck in advance, so they know what you're going to talk about. Be ready for them to say, I only have 10 minutes, give me the elevator pitch, and then just be ready to answer questions and have all of the things in your deck so that you can point to those if you need to, but just don't waste their time.
David, why does that title say a challenging macro environment?
Well, we're going to get there. I'm just sort of, a couple softballs. I do think I want you to just touch on, what should they be looking for in an investor? Especially during tough times. This is where you really learn about your investors because of. But if you could just comment briefly on what they should look for in selecting an investor.
So we keep a list of both kind of investor qualities and investors that are great and helpful and ones that aren't. And
Are we on the list?
yeah, of course you are. You're on the good list.
Thank you.
So look, I have two pet peeves with investors. One is investors that invest a small amount of capital. They don't care about your company at all. You're never going to hear from them. They just don't care, right? And maybe that helped you get some cash early on, and that's fine, right? Just keep your expectations, low with people like that. My other pet, and this is why, by the way, I don't actually love it when companies take a 250 grand from a $1 billion fund, right? Because the $1 billion fund might think they're getting a seat at the table and get an early look at the next round, but in reality, you'll get nothing from them, and if anything, it could be a bad message if they don't end up investing. That aside, the other kind of investor that we don't like are ones that bring drama and distraction and bring advice without context, right? And they think they know everything, and they haven't spent the time to learn enough about your business for their advice to be worth much. Or they just bring drama, right? Everything's a big thing, or when bad things happen in startups, which they do on a daily basis, right? It's constantly an up and down. They overreact. You want to avoid people like that. You want to work with people that just love what you're doing. They feel the pain point. They have a lot of fun working on it. They don't mind the 10 o'clock at night phone call from you to just brainstorm. It's fun for them. That brings energy, and that's contagious. That's what you want.
I would totally agree. And I think just finding great partners. Venture is a sector where there's a lot of investments made hoping for that one, unicorn. And so I've seen venture firms, I've been in the trenches a lot with businesses, and I see venture firms just kind of drop because they're not going to get the bridge, they're not going to make it, versus okay, let's try to give them a little chance and more support. So I'd really screen for the partners up front to make sure they're going to be there when things are great, and of course they will, but they're also going to be there when things aren't so great. We don't lead deals, so we typically are a follow-on check to somebody like a Javelin and Jed. And so we really try to spend a lot of our time making introductions, leveraging our network. And as you're thinking about the next round, so you're going to do a Series B, who can we introduce you to in our network? They'd be really great to get to know you early. And so finding people like that really want to go the extra mile to not only help you hire your team, help you find the next investor, just open up your network, I think is so important.
The one other thing I'll add is, if you can work with former operators, people who have done startups or had major roles in companies that have been very successful. They've been through the ups and downs, even companies that have failed, but they've been through the ups and downs, and they'll have a lot more empathy for what you're going through and a lot more real world advice.
And they'll be very creative when you have to solve problems. So let's talk about the elephant in the room. We are in a challenging macro environment. I think as investors, we really like this environment because things have slowed down and valuations have rationalized. We also love seeing entrepreneurs who are really committed to their ideas. You have to be super passionate and on a mission to survive a period like this. Do you have any tips that could be helpful during raising capital in a down market?
I can tell you what we're advising all of our companies. Look, in the last year, there's been a pandemic coming out of the pandemic, which is just as confusing. A land war in Europe, interest rates going up 5%, SVB failing in 48 hours. I mean, it was nuts. That's okay. There's also lots and lots of innovation happening. People are investing. I mean, the other seed and A funds I'm talking to are doing deals. We did 2 deals last month. And the harder part right now is actually more in the growth stage.
The later stage.
The later stage, where there's a whole category of funds that have completely changed their strategy. And so there's a lot less, it's harder. There's more friction to get the growth round done right now. So what we're advising all of our companies is to try as early as possible to control your own destiny and be more capital efficient, figure out how to get to profitability, or have such a compelling story for that next group of investors that, just assume it's going to be twice as hard, and you are one of the ones that get yeses. But to the extent you can control your own destiny, you're going to be in a much better place the next couple of years.
Totally agree. And extend that runway. I mean, we've seen companies that are doing well, have a path to profitability, but just don't pull back on spend. And then all the things that Jen just mentioned happen, and then they just run out of cash. And so a lot of our companies have had, at least have runway for a year if they're on the early stage, but they've really got to make that go further because we don't know when the market for price rounds is going to get better. And I would say, I joined venture 2 years ago, coming from private equity, so it's not the best time to come into venture, but it's actually good because we're getting to know founders earlier. I think valuations have softened, and there's not such a frenzy, right? But we're also, you're really going to have, it's a long game here. And for the young people in the room, like, these are cycles, and the cycles happen, and then we'll see growth again, and then we'll see another cycle. You just have to be able to, like, build your business to last through the cycle, and things will open up.
It does excuse me. It does also mean that with this early round that you would raise, you have to be able to show really clear progress, great metrics, and a path toward explosive growth after that in order to get that next round raised. So you have to make sure you are bringing in enough and running the company efficiently enough to make it that far to show those things.
Yeah, I think as a former entrepreneur, everything definitely takes twice as long, costs twice as much. So I would encourage you to raise as much money as you can, not worry about the valuation, but get it from good people, because those people, like Jed mentioned, former operators, they're gonna help you navigate and build a great business and get to some level of sustainability. And then, if you have opportunities for high growth, then you could consider venture.
You should also act like you raised half as much. Okay, have it in the bank, but don't spend it. A lot of entrepreneurs, whenever it's in the bank, they spend it. Save some.
Should we do some questions, maybe?
Go. Can you talk a little about valuations now? What's the metrics for early stage?
So, look, there's only so much. The question was about valuation. Does early stage valuation dipped, or where is it right now? And everything's dipped a little bit, but honestly, there's only so much dilution that happens in the seed stage, right? We're not going to take 50% of your company in the seed stage. That would be ridiculous. So the dilution is generally the same. It might be a little less money you're raising at a lower valuation, but the actual dilution for that round is going to be very similar right now. I think where you're seeing big dips in valuation are those Series C and Series D rounds.
Yeah, and in the earlier stage, valuations, from what we've seen, they haven't changed that much in kind of the seed round. We're in the process of getting a Series A price. We've seen a lot of seed rounds in the last few months. There's a lot of money out there. The real focus is on profitability. How will this business be profitable? Will they have the LTV to CAC if it's a consumer business that was mentioned earlier? Are the metrics going to be sustainable, and do they have the ability to get through this? And that's kind of what we're seeing. It's still really strong in the early stage.
I always think of startup valuations as somewhat arbitrary. If you look at the last 3 investments I did in the last 30 days, one was at 2 million and one was at 15 million, and there really wasn't much difference in, it was just the opportunity size, the team, the progress, and market conditions. So
one piece, just funny piece of advice I'll give you. Don't raise such a specific amount if you're at raising right now. For some reason, it's happened a lot in the last 2 weeks, but people have come in and raised, 1.875 or something, like some specific number, as if they know exactly what's going to happen over the next couple of years. And anyways.
A lot of people trying to raise like 2 or 3 million. I'm like, well, maybe you should try to raise like 500,000 or 750, and great, if you can get $1 million, take it. But if you're setting yourself up for a really high number, you might not even be able to clear that. And
I guess I'll say it slightly differently. Be flexible in how you're even thinking about fundraising, okay? Because sometimes a different amount of money gets you to those milestones that make it much easier for a bigger round to happen after that. And just be flexible. It might be that we want you to take more money, and that's just one fund's opinion. You don't get a bunch, and try and figure out what's right for you. But just be flexible.
And I would also say, find somebody. What we're seeing right now is a lot of businesses are doing what's called bridge rounds. So they don't want to do a price round because they don't think they'll get the valuation they want. They're going to have more dilution, and they're kind of like between an A and a B, or maybe a late seed and an A. So they're doing a bridge round with a note that's got a cap, and basically trying to get more runway in the business. I would always, a lot of those companies are getting the funding from their insiders. It's harder for an outsider to get familiar with the business in a short amount of time. But I would look for some of your investors to be people that have deep pockets that you can go back to afterwards and say, okay, now we got to do a little bit of a bridge here. We need 6 more months to prove these things out before we go raise an A or a B. We want to have somebody that can write another check. The deals that we've seen that have kind of collapsed in this market have been deals where you've got a lot of past the hat, early stage investors, advisors, angels, and then when things go bad, they aren't going to put more money
no
in.
real support,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. And I think you have to enjoy raising money because you're going to do it for probably the life cycle of your company, even when you go public.
Yeah.
So don't look at it. Investors like to invest in what's called a line, which is your relationship with them, not just a point in time. And next question.
Yeah, for the seed stage founders out there, product market fit is really important. A lot of people think they might have it when they don't. How do you interpret whether they have it or not, or if it's strong enough?
We have a, kind of a
Repeat the question.
oh, sorry.
Yep.
It's a question about product market fit, and when you're early on, how do you figure out if there is product market fit? What do you do when the entrepreneur has a different feeling of if that exists already or not? We have a phrase for that in our firm. We look for signal before traction. So there's a lot of ways you can find signal. It's the early usage of something, the way people are talking about it, the virality, their frequency of coming back. There's all these things you can look for to see if, with a little more fuel, explosive growth is possible. And product market fit for us is one of those things that when there's enough signal, it kind of becomes obvious, and we try to invest right before it's obvious.
Next question.
How do you evaluate founders?
The question is, how do we evaluate founders?
Our first screen is that they need to be female to invest in. Sorry. No, I mean, for us, we like founders that have done it before, but we do invest in a lot of first-time founders. We also like founders that have a co-founder and have some form of a team. There's a lot of founders that do it on their own. It's super lonely and hard, but they don't have a counterbalance to the skill set. So when we find co-founders, and we do invest in female-male co-founders, we find that to be really strong. We want people that have got experience and they have passion. Because if they just want to make money or they just think this is a good idea and they'll be able to flip it out early,
Sustain them.
it doesn't sustain. Sometimes it works, but it's a great idea and you're like, okay, they can sell this in a year, they'll make a lot of money. But you really want someone who's passionate, because when things get tough, you want someone who's really going to dig in because they believe in the idea and that they've attracted good people around them. So we're not usually the first check-in. So they've attracted some other people that have relevance to what they do, not just wealthy people, but people that are actually know what they do in the space. They've got some good advisors around them. They've maybe hired a few people, or they've got people working for equity. So they've just shown that they surround themselves with a good team, have a good idea, and have a lot of passion for it.
We used to, seed and Series A used to be something you were in for 5 to 7 years before they would exit. Now it's more like 8 to 10 years because there's a lot of other options to stay private for a while. So we look for people that we would want to be in the trenches with for that amount of time, which basically comes down to, if we left our firm and wanted to join a company, we would want to join them as a co-founder. And so this is about being mission-driven. It's about being just likable and fun to, just brainstorm with, and being able to be intellectually honest with each other, give feedback to each other. Katherine mentioned their ability to recruit. That's huge. Like, their ability to bring in other great people before they've even been funded, and have those people be betting their careers on this thing. That's a huge signal. We like people that are data-driven also, I'll throw in. People that aren't just winging it, they're really studying the data of what's happening, and then pivoting and adjusting along the way.
Yeah, I'm really looking at the founder and the problem they're solving, and what's motivating them, because the motivation has to be beyond money, like we've talked about. And I'm looking for a founder that has some unique insight into the future, and that gets me excited, that they see something that I don't see yet and most people don't see yet. And that's very fun as a former entrepreneur, to be able to invest behind someone's vision of the future.
Yeah, I was pushing paper or want to be fanciers or want to be influencers? I mean, is there
Yeah,
still
it's a great, I think it's a great question, especially for this room.
Yeah.
Yeah, are we being approached by entrepreneurs that are making things, like actual things? That, consumer, I think that's your question, right? Consumer product style things, not just software. And, right now, like, honestly, it's basically AI is everything that walks into our office. So, yes, there are things that are not AI. We did a consumer company, actually, we ended up investing in this one together, called Pair Eyewear relatively recently, that does eyeglasses, but they also do a million different magnetic tops that click onto the top of the eyeglasses and change the look of your look that day. And it really changes the whole model of the eyeglass market. It flips it on its head, and it's been it's kind of been a straight up since they launched. It's a really fun one to work on. So we do products. It's rarer. Most of what we do is software or marketplaces or fintech or things like that. But we have a few consumer products. I've also done those as an angel investor, which has been a lot of fun. We're in a company called Goodles together, which is a pasta company. If you haven't tried it, you absolutely need to. It's taking the industry by storm.
Yeah, and we do a lot of CPG, food products, consumer. Our biggest sector is women's health and healthcare, and our second biggest is consumer. So we do see a lot of consumer products. We love Pear and Goodles, and we got a lot of others.
The crazier, the better. I invested in a robotic tennis ball retriever. So when your kids are getting a tennis lesson, the robot.
Isn't that a dog?
Although I tried to get the tennis coach to use it, and he said no, the kids need to pick up the ball. So it is hard to change behavior, like we talked about. But,
A lot of founders struggle to raise any capital. Talk about raising that first even 50K, 100K, 250K. For those that are struggling to do that, is there a path for them, and any tips or thoughts on that?
Look, it's hard. Well, 50,000 is. I think what's hard is kind of the 500,000. 50,000 is usually that's friends and family, and there has to be the people that have known you in your life to bet on you, be willing to just lose all that. In fact, expect to lose all of that, and that's probably true for the first 50, 100, 150, that neighborhood. Once you start to raise more than that, 500, a million, you're talking about seed funds. You're talking about syndicates. You're talking about just finding different ways to get angel investors. And honestly, most of the bet is on you and your passion, the pain point you're solving, their faith in your ability to get to a point where you could raise more funding and build this, your knowledge of that space, and it's a total bet at that point. So they're betting on you and your vision. That's it. It's just network as much as possible and take $5,000, $10,000 checks. It doesn't matter to get the thing going, so you get enough proof points that you can get that next round raised.
And I also we'll go back to what I said before. If you're doing something like, say, a food business, if you can get a food investor to then talk about, I've got this food investor, is super knowledgeable, spent this time working at XYZ company, I think that really helps to open the doors. And then someone like, Goodle's a good example where Jed has invested in the CEO prior, and he said she's amazing. And just having a trusted source that invested in her early caused me to want to invest in her early. And so just continuing to get people that will do early checks, ask them what they care about, and then build a network with them.
Yeah, I think one great initial source is a former boss. I always love investing in employees that I've had because I know them. I know them as people. I know what type of worker they are. So go to someone who's mentored you. Another great source is that executive in that food business. Maybe someone who's exited a food business, right? They want to feel that high again of being involved with that business. And it's not just their money, but also their experience that's going to help you. So yeah, just going out there seeking advice, you'll find people, and they'll be great mentors too, which is equally as valuable as their capital.
Yeah.
All right, Katherine and Jed, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.